Look, when I first got the call about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, it felt like a mission. Not just another vanity project, but something real. Something that could change the way government works. Something that could, in theory, cut waste, bureaucracy, and inefficiency at a scale nobody had ever really attempted. I believe deeply in a leaner, smarter government. I believe that we could bring Silicon Valley energy, engineering rigor, and a ruthless focus on optimization to the federal bureaucracy. So I said yes. I joined as a special government employee. People laughed, people cheered, people said, Musk is going to gut entire agencies. He's going to blow up Washington with a chainsaw for paperwork. And yeah, I held up that chainsaw at CPAC. I said it was the chainsaw for bureaucracy. That was never just for show. In the early months, we moved fast. We embedded people across agencies. We canceled contracts. We renegotiated leases, looked at grants, dug into fraud and improper payments, programmatic redundancies, regulatory drag. We made bold claims, tens of billions saved, hundreds of thousands of jobs cut or offered buyouts, a radical reshaping of agencies. Everyone was watching, and some of us believed we could drive toward a $1 trillion savings goal. In my mind, that wasn't a wild target. It was the scale of the problem. But the more we dug in, the more complexity I realized. Government is not a startup. It's not a factory where you just turn the dial down or delete things you don't like, or spin up a lean team and optimize processes like you do at a software company. Every agency has a political, legal, social constraints. There are real people, real missions, and some of the programs we targeted weren't just waste. They mattered. And still, we pressed on. We claimed a lot of savings. On the DOGE website, numbers like $214 billion were posted, coming from a mix of asset sales, contract cancellations, renegotiations, fraud deletion, grunt cancellations, workforce reductions, regulatory savings. But looking back, truthfully, there was not enough transparent public accounting. External experts raised serious questions. Some of the big savings in our wall of receipts didn't hold under scrutiny. There were errors, inflated values, and we quietly removed some of the biggest entries after media pressure. I think that's a blemish on what we did, and I own that. Then things began to shift. My time officially was always going to be limited. As a special government employee, my contract was 130 days, and when it ended, I stepped away. I announced my departure on X, thanked President Trump for the opportunity, and said that I hoped the DOGE mission would strengthen over time, become a way of life throughout the government. That was sincere. But behind that, tensions were growing. I openly criticized what was called the Big Beautiful Bill. I said it undermined our work, that it didn't make fiscal sense, that it was a step backward from what I was trying to build. There was pushback from people who saw our cost-cutting as ideological or even dangerous. Some of my own team began to resign. Dozens of engineers, technologists, data scientists said they would not lend their skills to dismantle critical public services. That weighed on me. Because, yes, you want to cut waste, but you don't want to destroy the public good. Meanwhile, people were praising us, condemning us. It was messy. And then this week, Reuters reported and others picked it up. DOGE has effectively been disbanded 8 months ahead of its charter. Scott Cooper of OPM said, bluntly, that doesn't exist anymore as a centralized agency. Many of DOGE's functions have been absorbed back into OPM. In a way, it's anticlimactic. A lot of the flash, the chainsaw, the big announcements, the relentless cost-cutting faded quietly. No big ceremony shutting it down, no grand farewell. And that's painful, because I believed in it. I believed we could change how government works for real. But part of me also sees something else. Maybe we were too naive. Maybe it was hubris to think you could transplant startup logic into federal institutions without running into structural, political, and cultural resistance. Maybe some of our numbers were aspirational, not fully grounded. Maybe transparency was lacking. Maybe in the rush, we made mistakes. But I don't think it was all for nothing. Some of the people we placed in agencies, technologists, designers, product folks, they stayed. They're working now inside other parts of the government, trying to push small reforms, redesign web systems, modernize tech. The National Design Studio, for instance, led by Joe Gebbia, is doing some of that work. And so maybe DOGE doesn't exist as a formal, centralized department anymore. But its DNA lives on. The principles remain: deregulation, cutting fraud, rethinking bureaucracy, forcing government to run leaner, more like a well-engineered machine. I want people to remember that it wasn't just spectacle, it was an experiment, a gamble, undoing big structural reform, the kind people say is too hard for government. And yes, we failed in some ways. We failed in delivering fully verifiable savings. We failed in fully maintaining public trust. We failed in avoiding internal conflict. We failed in institutionalizing ourselves as permanent changemakers. But failure is part of innovation. If you don't try radical change, you can't reap radical reward. My regret is not that we tried. It's that we didn't go further or do it better. I take responsibility for where we overpromised, where our accounting was loose, where we underestimated how hard the system is to bend. At the end of the day, what matters to me is not the headline "DOGE shut down." What matters is whether some of its reformist spirit survives. I don't need my name on a building. I want government to be smarter, leaner, more efficient, less wasteful. If that legacy lives, even in part, then I'm okay with this being just the first chapter, not the final one. And after DOGE officially wound down, after the headlines spun their narratives and the pundits filled their nightly slots with autopsies of our so-called failure, I found myself thinking not about the noise, but about the machinery of government itself. This gigantic, creaking, overextended organism that everyone assumes cannot be changed, cannot be streamlined, cannot be made to operate with the basic logic that governs every successful engineering system on Earth. And I kept asking myself whether the collapse of DOGE was proof that the system cannot be fixed, or whether it simply means we didn't push with the right force vectors or apply the right torque to the right structural beams, because the truth is that DOGE wasn't just about cutting costs. That was the headline, the flashy thing people could fight over on social media. But beneath that, the real mission was to modernize the way the federal government thinks, to introduce the idea that you don't solve a century of inefficiency by passing one bill or shifting a few budgets. You solve it by updating the operating system, and that requires courage, technical sophistication, and frankly, a level of political insulation that we never truly had. And when the agency dissolved, the strangest part was how quietly it happened. Like someone turning off a massive machine while everyone else in the room pretended not to notice. And I remember staring at my phone, reading the internal memo that basically said, DOGE functions will be absorbed into OPM, like we were just a subroutine being sunsetted. And I felt a weird mix of relief, frustration, and a kind of existential curiosity. Relief because the fights were exhausting and constant. Frustration because we weren't done. And curiosity because I wondered what parts of our code would still run inside that older, slower environment. And in the months that followed, I got messages from people we'd placed across the government, some telling me their projects survived the transition, some telling me they were reassigned to something completely misaligned with their expertise, and some confessing that they felt guilty for wanting out because the pace at which we'd pushed, the velocity, the intensity, was hard to sustain inside a structure that punishes speed. And I started to realize something uncomfortable. Maybe I had underestimated not the bureaucracy, but the human limits of people living inside it. Because in the private sector, especially in environments like Tesla or SpaceX, you build culture around impossible goals, around redefining to the edges of what's doable. But in government, the culture is built around risk avoidance. One mistake becomes a scandal. One misplaced decimal turns into a congressional hearing. One reshuffled bureau becomes a headline about political sabotage. And maybe I didn't fully grasp how heavy that psychological overhead is for people who genuinely want to serve. And sure, some critics say DOGE was doomed because it was politically charged from the start, or because I'm not a government guy, but they ignore that plenty of what we did actually worked, and worked efficiently. We just never had a chance to institutionalize it before the environment shifted, and that's what eats at me. We were building a prototype of a future government, a leaner and more programmable model. But prototypes need time and patience and stability to evolve into production systems. And we were working in a place where everything is constantly being reset by politics, media narratives, legal challenges, public skepticism, and internal resistance. And now, looking back, I wonder whether DOGE was the right name. Yes, I love the irreverence, the meme energy, the idea of taking something as sacred and stale as federal bureaucracy and making it fun.